Well, welcome back to It's an Inside Job. I'd like to introduce Lisa Hopkins to y'all. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So great to be here.
Could we kick off by you introducing who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am, where do I begin? I'm a life and leadership coach. I call myself a creative energy optimizer. I work primarily with high performers in the creative arts industry as a coach,
Hmm.
also as a concierge, as a trusted advisor, that kind of a thing. I'm super, super passionate about helping people make an impact in the world. And so I love partnering with those folks in order to help them reach their highest potential. So that's something that is really close to my heart. I am a lifelong performing artist, so I spent most of my life and career in New York City as a director, choreographer, and dance educator. I was on faculty at Pace University in New York City
Hmm.
in the commercial dance and musical theater program. So, a lot of my students were either already on Broadway or in movies or whatever, or on their way. So very high, highly talented folks.
Hmm.
I'm super interested in the human behind the headlines. So I'm a podcaster, and that's kind of my byline. It's called Stop Time, Live in the Moment. But for me, it's about holding space for creative people. Um, that isn't a press junket. So really, it's where my two worlds come together, where these people are meeting me as a coach, not as a peer. And so that's become very, very integral part of my practice. So
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It gives you a little bit about me. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I am absolutely a proponent of living creatively.
Hmm.
I'm an author now. That's right. I've got to remember that. I recently I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
and now I can actually say I'm an author. So I recently published my new book, which we'll probably talk a little bit about, and that's super exciting for me. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's where
that's
I'm
what
at.
I'd really like to kind of dive into.
Yeah.
Obviously, your Broadway experience, and the whole gambit of that. Because in July you released the places where there are spaces, cultivating a life of creative possibilities. And when I was kind of going through the notes and understanding what the more and more the book was about, that's why I really wanted you on the show because as we've talked about, Lisa, pre-show that we on the show we try to focus a lot on resilience, leadership, and well-being. And I think your book kind of hits all those points. And and creativity and curiosity for me are definite character traits that add to this big picture that we call resilience.
Oh yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I was wondering maybe you could maybe kick off when you talk about creative energy, you
Mm,
introduced yourself as part of what you do.
mm.
What does that mean? Can you operationally define that?
That's a fantastic question. Yes. So I believe that we all have access to living creatively, and it does not mean being in the creative arts.
Mm.
So, I think the clarification and the distinction is important because even though my background is in the arts and a lot of my clients naturally gravitate towards me because I speak their language, it's for me, I have lived my life creatively, and that has
Mm.
nothing to do with paint or dance or music or any of that. It's really about a mindset. It's
Mm.
really about being able to look at things in creative ways, to be faced with an obstacle or an opportunity, and to be able to look at it with curiosity
Mm.
and with that creative brain, and meet it where it's at, and really live into the world of choice, if that makes
Mm.
sense. So for me, creativity is that. And the book, if you think, oh, I'm not a creative person, or I'm not a professional creative person, because you are a creative person, PS, everybody is.
Mm.
But if you this isn't about your, and maybe I'll read a little bit from it, I don't know, but
Mm.
it's not about that. I mean, it's my context in some of the stories, right? But I'm not talking about the dancing. I'm talking about my relationship in my mindset with what I'm seeing and what I'm learning. When my
Mm.
mentor talked to me about shading my movement, how that became an epiphany for me. Yes, as a dancer, it was a great tool, but as a artist of life,
mm.
it became, almost an affirmation and an understanding, and also a lesson in how to continue to embrace the many shades of who I am, just as a human, and not what we're doing, but who we are being.
Yeah, because I guess the main premise of your book or the central idea is spaces, is creating spaces. And for me, when I was going through my notes about your book, when a lot of us are in very fast-paced lives, and change and uncertainty comes at us at a remarkable pace right now. And many of my clients tend to be reacting. It's like putting out the fires, constantly putting out the fires, not pre-managing situations. And your book kind of resonated with me is because what you were speaking to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's creating spaces. That might be a physical space, that might be a mental space, a pause button per se, in which we can stop, think, and reflect before we act. And I, in your book, it's filled with anecdotes and stories, or there's a red thread that kind of connects all these. But maybe you could expand on what creating spaces as the central theme of your book, and then maybe we can dive into particular things such as mindsets, such as resilience and such.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the places where there are spaces are the places between things, like
Mm,
where you're not looking. I believe that they're always there. I just believe that we don't stop long enough to see
mm,
them. So, yes, we can learn how to create space and to hold space for ourselves and for others and for ideas and for all of these things. But we can also learn how to be like a lot of these musings of mine in the book are about, you know, they're not necessarily like epiphany moments, or you know what I mean? They're not like this has
mm,
just changed my life, or they're moments that you'll be able to relate to the inner message, I think.
mm,
And so for me, these were places where there were spaces, right? So I mean, it's funny because I mentioned at the beginning, and again, maybe I'll share with you, but the I call it the places where the fairies reside.
mm,
It's a magical place. It's the place between the leap and the landing. It's the place that between the question and the answer. It's the place between all of those. It's the place between, you know, me being late for our interview and
mm,
me being early, or whatever we make it, right? So it's all about, it's just everywhere. And I think we miss them. We miss them time and time again.
mm,
And so for me, it's not sort of a cautionary tale of don't miss, it's not that literal. Um, for me, I realized and recognized that I live creatively, and creatively doesn't mean how people see me when I'm doing my creative thing, if that makes sense. So I think that's hence the sort of subtitle, right? Cultivating a life of creative possibilities, because these are all, again, moments, in my life. Some of them are learning, some of them are teachings, but I sometimes I make up a story, right? I have a thing called the milestone myth, which I create a mother and a daughter and their perspectives
mm,
of, when it comes to May 1st or whatever the decision day is. And you can really relate to that. I have adult people, you could not have a child, and, but you can all relate to the idea that you think you want to do something, you don't really consider why,
mm,
right?
mm,
So again, I don't know if you want to dig into the space thing. You might go, well, what does that have to do with space, right? You go,
mm,
well, it's space in that race also to doing what you think you're supposed to do, to doing something because it's expected, to doing something, right? The
mm,
space to stop and ask yourself, why is it important to me? Because why it's
mm,
important to you is going to be completely different why it's important to me,
mm,
and as a teacher, when I was teaching dance in particular, I would I would say to the students, and it's a very high bar to get into the program I was teaching in. But I would say to those first years, young people, right? 18 years old, I would say to them, congratulations. I just, this may sound counterintuitive, but it's probably been super exciting, all your whole life being told that you're talented and you're doing these competitions and you're checking it all off. You're making your way and I'm sure you loved it at some point and maybe you still do. But here's the thing is you're here now and the social media posts have been made and everyone celebrated you. And now you're here,
Mm,
right here in this open space in this classroom with me. And hopefully you'll learn something from me.
mm,
But what I want you first to learn is that you do not have to be here. Connect to why. Redefine why now all the time, right? So it's like, you ask someone, why are you doing that? Well, I don't know, because I want to whatever. I want to be famous. I want to be on Broadway. I want to whatever it is. That's great, right? It's
mm,
great. I'm not saying don't have goals and don't be excited. But when you get there, if you lose track of your why, if you don't hold space in each moment for reconnecting
mm,
with that, then you're on automatic, you're on autopilot, right? And then you're just on literally on the fast track. We all hear about this, right? And what happens with that, of course, is unsustainable, right? Even though you're doing the thing that you thought you wanted to do, and it may be the thing you wanted to
mm,
do, but then I work with a lot of famous people.
mm,
They get known just for what they did. So they need to create for themselves to remember who they are and why they wanted to do what they do in the
mm,
first place. Because what happens is it becomes, they're performing for other people's reasons, showing up in the way. So if you're like the best in your, and it
mm,
translates to everything, right? If you're known for something,
mm.
right? So people that meet me here on your podcast, they'll go, "Oh yeah, she's the dot dot dot," and they'll put me in a right. But if you met me at the grocery store, you'd call me something else. Or if you met me in a dance class, oh, she's
Mm,
the dancer. Or if you met me in Canada, you go, oh, she's the American, or is she Canadian? Or you'd put me in a box, right? So
mm,
holding space for other people, so for me, it's all about connecting with yourself. I mean, I literally just said to somebody the other day, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times in your own words or said it yourself, but there's only two sure things in life, only two, because we tend to make everything yes or no binary, right? But there are only two sure things in life, and that's life and death. Everything in between that is choice. Everything, no matter how hard your life is. I'm not talking about, living your best life and sitting on,
mm.
sitting on the beach or whatever, but I'm talking about every moment, like the moment that I texted Jason and told him, "Oh my God, I put the I put our time." He's like, "I'm in the Zoom room and I am notorious for actually being right on time. Like that never happens to me, but it happened. So
You're
so
human,
I
right?
could have gone, I held space for myself. I created a space and thought, well, here I am talking about it. So it's generated something else. Whereas if I decided to say, oh, I got to show Jason that I'm actually a really responsible person. Oh my God, then it's all about ego. It's all about me. But that's not who I am, right? That's not who I want to be. And so I will hold space for myself. And it allows space for our mistakes
Mm,
because then we can learn from our mistakes, right?
mm.
And so on and so forth. And you can, yeah. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I
Yeah,
kind of
that's
went,
very helpful because I think
yeah,
creating spaces that for me, in a sense, and maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but between stimulus and response is
yeah.
that gap we can create, right? Before we
Viktor Frankl.
react, we can, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
man search for meaning, but it is that.
Hmm.
Something can come at me and I can just react. But
Yeah.
creating spaces, whether that's psychological space, whether it's actual physical and emotional space,
Yeah.
allows time for processing. You
Yep.
know, once we are there, that then it's a matter, it's kind of going through the steps, it's easy. But when we are under the pressure, when the tension and
Mhm.
the stress and the anxiety is on, it is so easy for myself, and I work with
Yep.
this every week, every
Yep.
day with clients. I can slip down into the rabbit hole and
Yep.
forget about that, even though I've talked about this for decades, literally and
Yep.
metaphorically, I guess. But my point is, you've talked. I mean, we don't need to name names here, but you've worked with people who are household names. Everybody knows who they are, down to the first year students who have the privilege of working with you in whatever esteemed institution that you worked with. what is some of your advice to help people to be cognizant, to stop up, to create the space? Because sometimes that's where it goes. It just falls through the cracks and we just react.
Yeah, it's funny because I think there's a misunderstanding that it's about it's like it's an action item. Like, how do I do
Mm,
that? And that would be a natural question. Well, how do I do that?
mm,
And I think it's my answer to that is awareness.
mm,
Um, when we are aware, then we are more open. When we are triggered under stress, we're more closed. So if you think of it as a lens, right, of the way of looking at something,
mm,
it's literally that, and you know this as well as I do, Jason. So this is it's about living life wide open, but not always the same aperture, let's say. So, but the awareness piece, because wide open at if you I always use this sort of thing, but if you think of wide open, or if you want wide open,
mm,
I think about these as lenses, right? So as you're very narrowly focused down here in fight or flight, right, or
mm,
freeze, and that's the more catabolic energy. And then as you move up the scale, you're just more conscious,
mm,
right? But it's not a typing thing. This is what I work with people. So they think, well, I want to be like, up at the top of that wide open, all the time. I go, well, no, you don't.
mm,
Because you wouldn't be human if you were up
mm,
there all the time. We are a mix of all of this.
mm,
All the time we're a mix. We have our default energies for sure,
mm,
and it's drawing awareness around where our defaults are under stress, and also when things are going really well for us. That's also fantastic information, because sometimes we default to our strengths and we overlook other things, right? Or if you want
mm,
to apply that to something, we to our certain tastes, maybe like, I love that restaurant, I'm going to that restaurant again, you know, as opposed to, I do love that restaurant. What else might be available to me in this moment? Is that what I want right now?
mm,
Right. So it's about not living so narrowly. So my advice would be to draw awareness that we are diverse as humans internally all the time,
mm,
that there's no one way of being, that we are a unique blend of our own energies, but we do have defaults for sure, right? So the way I default under stress is going to be different than you, and it's also going to be different depending on the stressor for me, and for you or whoever, and also on the time of the stressor, on how you're feeling, what other influencers are going on for you. So we build our repertoire of understanding self. That's what I do a lot of
mm,
with my clients. So that, because again, they're high performers, right? So they're used to success, they're used to achievement. They don't come in and go, "Oh my God, I'm having such a problem. I'm so burned out." Like that's not where they resonate. Sometimes they come in and just have a feeling that there's something more, and they're in circles where it's difficult to say that, because from the outside everyone's saying to them, you got it all, man, and that sort of thing. And so, but and not all my clients are A-list people, but they're and it's more about being ready to do the work, to
mm.
understand that it's intrinsic. I'm not going to give you a 12-step plan. You know how to make a
Mm,
12-step
mm,
plan. If
mm,
you want to do that, you're wasting your time, but with me, but sure.
mm,
Um, but I do coach around insight, right? Because one insight changes everything, but only if you do something with it.
mm,
So again, only if you create space for
mm,
the insight. Because how are you going to apply that? Now you could have someone say, well, how are you going to apply that? And then you can, take it to action and create your own world, to go from the
mm,
intrinsic to the external. It's definitely applicable, right?
mm,
So you don't live forever in the land of, of the altruistic inner work. It's a lot of inner work, but then we apply it. And what we realize is that it doesn't apply just to the thing that where you've been really always doing that, right? Like you were saying, like, years and years I get stressed, and I respond and react in the same way. So that's awareness. You bring awareness around that, and then sometimes we play a little bit with what would be different
mm,
if you responded differently. Even if you don't, what might be different? And I talk about living in the land of possibilities rather than probabilities
Mm.
because, the probabilities are great when we know what our strengths are, but our strengths can absolutely become our weaknesses. I
Mm.
see it time and time again. I've seen it with myself, right? Where you just
So,
keep
sorry,
defaulting.
just so when our strengths become weaknesses, for example, if someone says, I'm honest in every case. For me, all these sort of strengths, when we look at them, are kind of like bell curves. And, as we
Mhm.
build up the bell curve, that's great because we're developing. And then there's a sweet spot at the top, at the peak. But where strengths can sometimes become disadvantages, from in my vernacular, is when we head down the backside of that bell curve, where it starts to actually maybe bite us in a sense. If you
What do you
follow
mean?
what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'm curious. What do you mean, like, bite you in
Well,
what sense?
for example, if someone says I'm honest, I'm an honest person, right? I'm transparent in everything. I think that's great to a certain point, but there may be a point where maybe it's best to tell a white lie and not be brutally honest with everything about everything you're thinking, because that can affect us in
Mhm.
a sense, where there can be downsides to things where people say I'm very thorough or I'm very conscientious. Well, there's a
Mhm.
point where you can be conscientious, but there's a point where you're so conscientious that you're sacrificing the me always for the we, for the other person, and we
Interesting.
don't kind
Yeah.
of respect ourselves. So is this kind of, I don't know if it's the same sort of area you're talking about where strength becomes a weakness, or maybe you could speak to that.
Yes, I mean, I completely hear what you're saying. What stands out to me about what you're saying and is that I would go further, and I do this a lot with my
Mm,
clients, is to be more uh I guess granular with our words,
mm,
right? To be more specific and bespoke to what these words mean to us. I think that's so important that we don't because the brain to me, I use the analogy of chat GPT or whatever, right? Of AI is the brain has only the information and data based on it's incredible,
mm,
but it only has data based on what you've done or what it knows or what it's seen or what you tell it.
mm,
So if you say, I'm afraid of public speaking, it's going to find all the reasons
mm,
to tell you don't do that because you're going to be in danger because you're afraid of that. Right. So if you if you say if you flip it to say, you know, I'm it makes me nervous, but I am strong and actually, or whatever, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? You can
mm,
reframe that. But to your point, the word that you used when you said honesty as a strength, I probably would talk to the client and say, what is it more a value or a strength?
mm,
And the reason I say that because the way I think of strengths in this context are ways of being, because everyone's always talking about ways of being, right? They want to know like about actionable stuff. When I'm this, oh, this is how I do things. This is how I get shit done. This is how I, right,
mm,
or whatever. And this is what people know me for. This. I'm great at this, and I'll do that. And so, yes, to your point, absolutely. Sometimes you take on too much because, right, everyone expects
mm,
it of you, and so on and so forth. So that it can bite you in that way. But I think ultimately it's you telling yourself that you're good at this as well, and that you start to believe that it's the only way to do something, and
mm,
so you rely on it. It becomes attached
mm.
to you become attached to your strength. So a perfect example is in the life of a dancer.
Yeah.
When I mean, you know what I mean, where I used to be able to do that, but I can't do that anymore. And so your identity gets lost in that, right? Or whatever it is you do.
Mm,
It could be, as we get older, or um, but it can also be you might be overshadowing the potential of your team. Like, you might, you know what I mean? You like, and they just go, well, she always does it,
mm,
so we'll let her do that. So if you want to lead, right? Maybe you step back a bit.
mm.
Maybe you strengthen other areas of yours. You learn, you lean into that, um, finding what you don't know, because that's where you get strong, right? It's like if you overuse a muscle, you wear it out.
Very true. Because one of the, just to rewind back, is one of the things you said when you work with clients is understanding the self. And what I pulled from your book, resilience, you kind of encapsulated in, I saw sort of three things: a strong sense of self,
Yeah.
maintaining a positive outlook, and learning from past experience. When it comes to understanding oneself, I mean, what do you specifically do to help clients, whether they be dancers or corporate clients or what have you? How do you help them create a more robust mindset by understanding the self? What is it that you try to explore with them? I know previously you were talking about understanding the why of what they're
Mhm.
doing, understand the why or the reasoning behind their motivations or their drivers per se. How do you
Yeah.
help them sort of discover the self to build more resilient mindset?
Um, I get them to recognize that I help them to recognize by
Mm,
sort of asking them questions, right? I don't know. Like I think it's very important
mm,
that people understand in coaching that, well, at least my philosophy, that I do not know the answers for you. If you hired me as a consultant, I could give you some ideas or whatever, right? That's a different hat. But when it comes to coaching, I'm an expert at listening to not to what you're telling me, but to what you're telling yourself. And then I get curious about that, but
mm,
in an unattached way. So I might just with permission say, Jason, I noticed that you said, you know, honesty was one of your strengths. Tell me more about that or
mm,
whatever. You know what I mean? And literally get them to spend hold space so that they will spend the time reflecting because I believe they know the answers. I 100% believe they know the answers.
mm,
And they just don't know how to get there. And so trust becomes a huge thing. Trust is a repeated theme, I find. And it's trust of self, it's trust of the process, it's trust of, you know, trusting that it can be scary when you're growing, I feel like internally, like when you're growing, doing the personal work. It can
mm,
be scary because it's not as well, it's not as predictable. It's you're living in possibility, but in possibility, there's no clean answers.
mm,
And that's scary. That's where creatives thrive because we start with a blank slate and that's where we get really excited, right? But in life is a blank slate.
mm,
And so we get in our lanes, right? You hear it all the time, stay in your lane, stay in your lane. And it just becomes about getting it done and achieving and spinning the wheels as fast as you can and not literally not smelling the roses, and and I think it's about learning that life is now. It's
mm,
right now. It's fantastic that you're doing whatever it is you're doing, or I feel you that life sucks, right now. But let's dive into that. Like,
mm,
and what else is true? And I think often I say, this is great. Like when there's something that doesn't work,
mm,
someone who doesn't get a job. I had a corporate client who was up for a very big job, was very, very excited about it and didn't get it. And instead of, me going, oh yeah, that's too bad, I was like, that's fantastic. What what did you learn? Because it isn't about the thing. I said, the goal is to be the best that you are. I think that's the bet in everybody I work with and how I work with myself. Be the best. Learn how to be the best that you can in everything you
mm,
do, always.
mm,
So I was late today for the podcast. Is that the best? Do I normally do that? No. Was it the best that I could do in that moment? Yes.
mm.
Nobody plays to fail.
Well said.
Nobody,
Yes.
nobody plays to fail. And I think we need to understand that our best is a spectrum, that my best yesterday is not the same as my best right now or, in 3 hours. So we can learn and we can cull information about that so that we can be as, especially in high
Mm,
performance, right? Which means leadership or whatever. I don't mean like dance performance. I mean, you know, high performing in any field. If you're aware of your strengths and how you want to show up, then you become aware, and we do this work, you become aware of the influencers, you become aware of what actual things, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, environmental, all those things that help you be your best. I help my clients recognize their strengths, recognize that they're not their only strengths, learn how to put them in the toolbox, right? Learn that that's part of their foundation. It's like self-care, right?
Mm,
So many people go, oh, I'm running on empty, but I'm great when I work this hard and everything, but then I burn out and so on and so forth. But now none of my tools, my candles and baths and
mm,
books and walks and or whatever, they're not working, or whatever.
mm,
And it's like, well, yeah, because we start to associate. If you only do self-care as a band-aid when you're stressed,
mm,
then you associate self-care with I'm stressed.
mm,
So that glass of wine at the end of the day becomes a, not I'd like to have a glass of wine because I enjoy a glass of wine. It becomes associated with it. I must be stressed. And so I teach my clients to, it sounds so simple, but it's amazing, right?
mm,
But it's like, why don't you roll down, not just when you're stressed or roll your head or take a while, but all the time. Like,
mm,
why don't you build a foundation? I teach them to have a menu because what happens is then we get dependent on, well, when I run, I feel great, but I have no time to run. It's the first thing that goes off my calendar or whatever. And you go, well, what else is on your menu?
mm,
So the goal is not to run. The goal is not to lose weight. The goal is not to just, look good in the dress at the presentation. The goal is self-care every day.
mm,
So it does not need to look the same every day. So create yourself a menu. And the goal is just do something from your menu every day. Doesn't matter what it is. So you could have 2-minute meditation. You could have 15-minute walk. You could have whatever you want on your menu. All
mm,
the things. Only you know what chills you down. And then you do it every day, not just when you're stressed. You start building a foundation and then
mm,
you can amp up when you are stressed. Then you go, okay, now I really got to amp up. I got to get more sleep and I got to eat better and I got, or whatever it might be.
mm,
And so that's again, understanding the diversity of who you are and not just being reactive. I'm stressful now,
mm,
so I'm going to change gears and I'm going to try this. But it's too late then, right? It can be eventually. Or I always warm up this way before I go to do a presentation or before I go walk
mm,
on stage. Why is it not working anymore? And then you start freaking out about what's wrong with me. And you say, well, there are other ways to warm up. Have you explored other ways to warm up that you also like? Then you've got choice. Then you're living, and I think we talked about this before. I have a big thing that I talk and teach about
mm.
energetic choice. It's important. It's important to know that you always have choices.
And so energetic choice is just the choices, choices are always us between, cradle and grave. It's life is about choices. As you said, it's a blank slate right here and now, but the choice I make will start to bring life to that. But when you mean energetic choices, can you sort of maybe expand on that?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I have something I call the choice capacitor. I made it a visual so that people could really, it started really resonating with my
Mm,
clients. And so I kind of made it something more specific, which I don't always do. I tend to be more sort of, feel it in the moment and
mm,
translate it that way. Um, and it really has shifted their thinking. So I'll share it with you. So I put it in a model of 5 energetic choices, right? And this is the way we speak to ourselves, basically. So the first energetic choice I call I can't, right?
mm,
So when you say I can't, you're obviously limiting yourself, right? I can't do that either because I don't have time or, you have reasons why. You're telling yourself, you have all sorts of reasons. Usually when you say I can't, there's so much behind that. Why? Because I'm not good enough, because I don't have time, because I did that before, because, whatever. And so how many times, do the listeners say I can't? I mean, honestly, how many times have you said I can't, even lightly
mm,
to yourself? Have, if someone says, hey, Jason, do you want to go for dinner tonight? Oh, you know what? I can't. Even that reduces choice, right? you have other choices of how to say that. I'm not saying that, you should go or anything. So there's I can't. The second one is what I call, and I have to. So it's an energetic choice that I call I have to. And when we say I have to, we get through things with force. I have to because if I don't, it's the ultimate binary. If I don't, I'll fail. I have to. But it also helps us, it does help us push through stuff. It helps us get stuff done. So, and we do it all the time, right? I have to do this. I have to do this.
Mm,
And we move up to the middle of, and it's kind of an arc. I can share the model with you, the choice capacitor. So these are all sort of the less conscious, right? Energetic choices. The right in the middle, you've got I should. And I call I should the tipping point,
mm,
right? Into the higher conscious kind of energetic choices. But I should is characterized by shame.
mm,
So there's a knowing that you could do that you are capable of doing that.
mm,
And it can motivate you to do something, but it's usually connected to I should do that because I said I would, or I should do that, because I can, or we all
mm.
know we should all over the place, right? But as soon as you lose the shame, you're living in I could, right? And when you recognize just simply the potential without the shape, then you start to actually feel it choice. So then, so Jason, do you want to go to dinner? You could go, I can't,
Mm.
I have to, because I said I would at some point, and she asked me, so I have to go. Or you could say, no, I should go because it's good
Mm,
for me to meet with colleagues, or whatever, right? Or you could go, I could go,
mm,
but it doesn't mean you have to go. See, it's not like you're going to go necessarily.
mm.
Um, and when you get into I could, then it's easy to move into not only could I, but the fourth energetic choice, which is I want to. And when
So
you
it
when you
is,
say
sorry, between I want and I should. So I
so
could.
I should, when you
Mm.
lose the shame, becomes I could, right?
Also, okay, when you lose the shame. Okay,
Yep.
got it.
And then once you're in I could, when you start to feel that you're capable of stuff, you it's easy to shift to the next if you want. And again, it's not mandatory that you shift. It's just
Mm,
that you have these ways of speaking to yourself, which is I want to. And when you say I want to, you get a little bit more like you can hear it in the tone of my voice.
mm,
No, I want to do that. And then you start to have reasons why you want to do it, as opposed to I can't, where you have all the reasons why you can't.
mm,
I'm a loser. I'm too old. I'm
mm,
not enough. But here you're like, no, I kind of want to do that. You're not doing it yet, maybe you are. But you're like, no, no, I want to do that.
mm.
And then you start saying why. And then the whys start helping. I want to do that because, right? So it starts to become connected to who you are. And then the ultimate, right? And this has really transformed some of my clients. So simple. And I didn't have the whole model. I just used to say it all the time. Is I get to. That's that's the highest energetic choice, the highest conscious, and it's choice with gratitude. I get to do this. So not only are you doing it, but you're having gratitude while you're doing
Mm.
it. And that's huge because gratitude often comes in retrospect. And we could go down that rabbit hole. Oh,
Yeah.
that was great. Oh, I really appreciate that. Or
Mm,
or in the hope world of the future of like, oh no, I'm practicing gratitude because this is really good and I'm afraid it's going to be taken away. It's fear-based, right? But when you're at I get to, you are living in the moment and you are grateful for it. Now, this does not mean that you only, that you use I get to like some sort of, secret or manifestation that you put it, and that everything will transform into roses. What it means is that when you're doing things that you actually don't really want to do, but you're going to do, there are things in our life like taxes that we know we're going to do because they are connected to being responsible and so on and so forth. If you apply I get to the things that you don't want to do, it can be life changing if you know you're going to do them anyways, right? So it's
It's a
like
powerful
I
reframe. I mean, it is a very powerful reframe because I think, we all have our personal storms, and some of those storms we can move through, but
Mhm.
sometimes those personal storms, they hover like a hurricane,
Yeah.
right? And we need to move into the center, the eye, to find that, again, to create space, if I may
Blank
use that
space.
metaphor, into the I. And then maybe it is to be more cognizant, as you said, to who am I, to
Yep.
understand ourselves. And part of it, this is a brilliant model from I have to all the way to I get to. And I understand very well now what you mean by energy, because all of a sudden your energy starts boosting.
Yep.
Because, when I'm working with clients, and I'm sure it's indicative of the clients you have also in the stories, you ask them, they will tell you a story. Our brains work on stories. And a lot of the times we are not cognizant of where a lot of people, even myself, I should. And it's a type of what we call, and in clinical psychology, it's kind of guilt loading. I should
Yep.
do this. I should do this. And if we don't cross that line, okay, here's a little more guilt. Here's a little more guilt. But we don't realize how many times a day, how many times a week we use I
Hmm.
should, I should, I
Yep.
should. And so
Yep.
I can understand that. And that can really, leak our energy out when we feel we're forced or we have to. And sometimes we have to. Sometimes we should have. I mean, I'm not saying it's all bad, but yeah, it is hamstringing us. It's sometimes it is putting handcuffs on ourselves and limiting choices.
100%. And I think the key is, again, with the I get to, is it
Mm,
applies, it's choice with gratitude. So
mm,
so you take ownership of whatever it is you're doing. And whether it's the dishes, the taxes,
mm,
or whatever it is. And it changes when you start talking to yourself about, you know, oh, I have to get on a train to go to my, sixth show of the week or whatever. I get to go. I mean, like, when you start to really recognize
mm,
that, it's easy to find, well, we are, as you well know, we are negatively biased. We're wired
mm,
for the negative because that keeps us safe,
mm,
right? I mean, so that's what our brain does. But that's the old brain. That's the primitive brain. And so we work on, the more conscious brain, which requires
mm,
slowing down, and teaching the old one to come in. Let's integrate. Like, for me, that's the balance piece. Let's
mm,
integrate here. Because yeah, man, you are my pinch hitter when I'm really in trouble, primitive brain. But let's get some discernment instead of judgment. Let's not jump to conclusions. Let's ask what else is true. Let's
mm,
think again. Let's slow down to speed up, all of these things. And, that was great to help me get where I got here. But
for
how I
sure.
could really use you is
Mm,
this. And that's where rescripting comes in, right? I do a lot of that with my clients. It's like, no, that limiting belief you had served you.
mm,
Somewhere in your life, it absolutely served you. There's nothing
mm,
wrong with you. Like people, that's the other thing. I said, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just old programming. It's just,
mm.
and so
Yeah,
when you
you've
draw
moved on, the world's moved on, but that old rules in your head, the old scripts are still kind of rumbling around in the back of your head,
100%,
right?
100%. It's funny because maybe I can share this with you. I
Yeah,
pulled this
please.
short passage
Yeah,
from the
please read the
book.
passage. That'd be brilliant.
It kind of relates. So again, each chapter is, I don't know, 2 pages or something. You can pick it
Mm,
up anywhere. It's not sequential.
mm,
So, if you don't read the whole book, it's not the end of and everything includes some journaling space if you want at the end, and like a coaching prompt. But well, I'll give you, this is an example of the
please.
kind of thing. So let me go here. So this one is chapter 7, and it's called Navigating Your Own Course. It's kind of what we're talking about. So, have you ever shared a thought or an idea before you've had a chance to process it yourself? Testing the waters, you float the idea to friends or family, hoping that they'll get on board. If they don't, do you second guess yourself, wondering if you were just being silly or selfish for even thinking it in the first place? And then, based on the new insecure thoughts that are flooding your brain about the original idea, you decide not to rock the boat, convincing yourself that it's better to suppress your thoughts than to make any waves. So you bottle it up and toss it away into the sea of unprocessed ideas and move on with the more predictable, familiar terrain of life as you know it. Alternatively, what happens if they do get on board with
Mm,
your idea right away? A sudden current of affirmations washes over you, and buoyed by their support, you ride the wave of enthusiasm, eager to impress. The course has been clearly mapped out for you, charted by the opinions of well meaning friends and family. And so you show up as expected, arriving at all the scheduled ports of call on time. Remember that little idea that you once felt drawn toward? It has now grown into something you are being pushed into without giving yourself the chance to consider why. The need for external validation is real. It can even propel us towards doing things we hadn't imagined we could do. And it's perfectly natural to want to feel championed by those we love. A quick energy boost. But at the end of the day, road or journey, there's only you.
Mm.
They aren't connected to the thing you wanted to do. They've tied it to what matters to them. So when you arrive at the destination, the one where you thought you wanted to go, you feel like a castaway, stranded on a desert island, trying to remember why you even wanted to go there in the first place. Where is everyone? They've moved on. They're good. However well meaning your friends and family are, they don't know what is best for you. Only you know what is best for you. The rush we feel from external validation is nothing more than a quick hit. It's unsustainable. What will keep us on course is truly connecting to why things really matter to us. So the next time you have a new idea, take the time you need to process it before you spill it out or bottle it up.
Mm.
Your thoughts are there for a reason. And when you take the time to explore what they signify, you can take the helm and navigate your own course.
Well written, well written. I think very astute the way you've put it together. Because then it comes back to the premise of this whole conversation to create that space,
Yeah.
right? In which you can take the time to assess, to consider, to weigh, as you said, possibilities and maybe not always probabilities.
Yeah. And I mean, the prompt I put at the end was what's something you'd like to do no matter what anyone thinks. I,
Mm.
I think, I think it's so important. It's so important to really take the time to connect to whatever it is that you want to do, that you want to say, that you want to be, that whatever, everything,
Mm.
an idea, whatever, because then you're impermeable. You're not relying on that. That's all just the cherry on the cake. If people like what you're doing, that's fabulous, you know? Um, and it allows you to, well, to be your own champion,
Mm.
and yeah, and really live bravely and openly.
Yeah, because what it comes back to is sort of the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we
Yep.
tell about ourselves in relation
Yep.
to the world, people around us, what we do, who we are, what drives us. And I really like this, forgive if I'm not using your terms, but the energy choices of this five. Would you call it the energy capabilities or
So yeah, so the model, I'll send it to you. The model is called the choice capacitor.
capacitor?
And
Sorry.
yeah,
Mm,
and the I call it energetic
mm,
choice.
mm.
Those are energetic choices. Yeah.
Because a lot of the stories from my experience working both in a clinical corporate setting over, the time of my career is that all stories begin with one of these usually.
Yep.
I get to, I want to, I could, I'm willing to, I should, I have to, I must, what have you. And
Yeah.
then a lot of the stories we tell ourselves about a specific situation may only be two or three lines, two or three sentences, or they could be very productive and very helpful questions, or they can be very negative questions that sort of drive us into the ground. And as for me, storytelling is key. How do you work with storytelling with people?
Oh wow. That's a big one
Take it where you
because
will.
what's up?
Take it where you will. The
Yeah,
question.
no, I mean, I think it's funny. I literally have I was looking because I'm pretty sure there's a chapter called The Stories We Tell Ourselves. Let me just see if that's true. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I will answer your question, I promise. But let me. It's funny when you look at your own book. Oh, I call it The Lies We Tell Ourselves. I don't know if it's relevant. I mean, probably is, but let me grab it. Yeah, let me grab this for a sec. Um, sorry, Jace. Let
Yeah,
me.
but a lot of it is, the narratives, our brains do lie to us. I mean, they're not always telling us the truth, but the the thing is, we sometimes believe those lies and then we go down the rabbit hole and we stress
That's it.
ourselves, drive anxieties. But if is it is
100%.
a short chapter that you'd like to share, or is there some poignant point from it that maybe we
Yeah, and
can
I might not even, let me just say, it is. Oh, this might actually, I don't know. This may or may not resonate. So this is about a lie. This is something that happened to me where I
Mhm.
had a client ask me if he could share something that he said to someone else.
Mhm.
And what I observed was how I responded in my head to it and where I ended up responding to him. It's quite short. I don't know. Shall I share that with you or no?
Please, please, please. That'd
Okay.
be great.
So it's called The Lies We Tell Ourselves. It's chapter 21. So I woke up yesterday morning to a text message from a client asking me if he could use something powerful that I had said in a session with their own client. Before I had a moment to receive the honor of the request, my egoic mind puffed up with blustery pride. They better credit you if they use your words, it warned me, telling me that I needed to protect myself and my ideas. It went on to promise me that it was keeping me safe from plagiarism and advised me to hold on very tightly to what was mine. Something felt horrible in my body, so I just stopped to feel it. I listened to what my body knew, but my mind was too narrowly focused to see. It didn't take long. Just enough time to take in a few breaths was all I needed to feel the warmer, wiser wisdom flow into my mind. From that sage perspective, I was able to recognize that the message from the frightened little voice inside me telling me that I needed to protect myself was untrue. This revelation exposed the tiny minded thoughts for what they were lies. I responded to my client's text by telling him that, like good food, we take in the flavor of thoughts, ideas, and experience and mix them together in different measures to make a new recipe bespoke to us. The individual ingredients aren't owned, the recipe is ours to create and recreate. I extend the same invitation to you, dear reader. By all means, add and share anything you've tasted in my kitchen and add your own unique flavor. I went on to suggest to my client, serve it rather than use it with the people at his table and allow them the opportunity to add their own seasoning. My client messaged right back and thanked me, saying that I had a way with words. I thanked him for inspiring them.
Hmm. Very.
So
I really like that story. I very much like that story. It's, letting go of those narratives that constrain us, create the space.
that's it,
Yeah.
and what came out of it was a chapter in my book.
Mm,
So,
mm,
I could have stopped. I could have stopped at, yeah, no, that's not good. I'm trademarking that. And could you wait? And, all that nonsense. Or I could just have said no, or I could have, and instead I stopped. I created space. That was a place where there was space
mm,
where I didn't react to what came into my head. But what was really fun, and I do this all the time in the book, is to be the observer and the participant. So I'm watching how I'm thinking, and that's been really fun. So a lot of it is musings like that. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. I have a sort of a maybe a curveball question here. I ask this to a lot of authors, and yes, you are an author now. You have that professional feather in your cap. So let's just give kudos where kudos are earned. But what did you learn about yourself through the writing the book?
Ooh, that's a great question. So about 5 years ago, the title came to me. I wasn't actually writing the book. I had always wanted to write a book.
Hmm.
So it was never attached to I'm a coach because I was barely a coach then. And I want to write a book. So that's not the way I roll. But I had the title, The Places Where There's Spaces, and I made it not this title page, but I did it never changed. I knew that I was going to write a book called that. And over the years I had put stuff in it and it was kept a little bit precious. Like I
Hmm.
can look at my old notes where, and maybe well, it probably will be another book, but where I started not seeing what was actually in front of me. Because during the pandemic, I never stopped writing. But I was writing these little solo episodes on my podcast, right? So it started as an interview show, but then I started fooling around. I had time, so I started, recording my voice, and it was my daughter who said, actually, if you recorded that and put it on your podcast, like that would be, I would listen to that. I like shorter form,
Mm,
and it's really cool. So I'd never done anything like that before. I'm like, but it's an interview show, blah, blah, blah. So I got over myself, still not thinking that this would be anything. And then everyone on the podcast probably responded almost more, and to this day, more to those kinds of musings
mm,
and teachings than even the interviews. They're different, they're related, but they're different. So along I did, so I kept doing it really like really regularly. And then I started realizing, when I had this separate idea, with different chapters, and I
mm,
was like, I was really in my old creative brain almost. It was really funny because, like my professional creative brain. Then I thought, wait a second. And I started going, what if I like rewrote and rewrote some of these, picked some of them. It's already there. I teach that a lot. You
mm,
teach what you most need to learn, right? It's already right in front of you.
mm,
So I was like, holy cow, I have so much writing. And then of course, for me, it was the picking, and then I never wanted anything to be the same. So it became another level of taking what I had written kind of off cuff into actually writing it. Like, so there was a bit of that. Some of it is representative of what's on there. And then also finding, like, I found an old blog that I had started writing. And I grabbed that. I grabbed just one thing from that. So what I learned, the question was, what did I learn? I learned not to be precious and to recognize what you've already done, to not silo your worlds, to recognize that, you know, um, it's okay to do things your own
mm,
way. I had a lot of people, well, I didn't really tell anybody. I was just kind of doing it. Um, and then it came together kind of relatively quickly. I
mm,
mean, in terms of when I started doing that, and I got the publisher and stuff, and they helped me along. I mean, it's self-published, but with a really good publisher. Like, so it wasn't like a kind of on Amazon, like where,
mm,
where the bar I feel is low. Like, I feel like I'm like that. I'm like, as a dancer, I'm like, you could open a dance studio, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, to me, I felt like, no, like I would like to have somebody that's gonna support me and guide me,
mm,
so they had a good an editor and this kind of thing. And they've been wonderful. Anyways, so yeah, that helps me because that helped keep me on track,
mm,
because I am a very growth mindset kind of gal, but I can get into doing so many things and seeing so many possibilities,
mm,
that, you know, it can get in my way sometimes. So I learned that was really helpful, and I'm still on that journey. I'm learning that, I'm really happy with the success of everything I'm doing, but I'm also cognizant that there's a way to grow
mm,
that is beyond just what I do myself, if that makes sense. And it's not that I'm like precious about, like, well, I don't want anyone to edit my podcast. And I did design the cover of my book. I mean, there are things that I will take control of, but there are people that are experts at certain things, so I'm starting to learn that now it's about I know my why, right? I feel like
mm,
my why has always been very connected. And so now I'm kind of living in the how, which is kind of fun. And so I'm exploring that. I'm exploring, because we all do. We as mental health professionals tend to really focus on the why, which obviously is very important, and the self and all that. And I start to think about, you know, the who it is you're being,
mm,
um, and then also the how it is you, because you do have and there's again choice. There's so many choices about how you do things.
mm,
So it's so connected to the being, right? I think people used to think about, or I used to think about, or I don't know, but we tend to think about how as like, give me a plan.
mm,
But how is connected, I believe, to the who. And I love that they have the same letters in them. So you will hear something about that soon. but but because they're so tied together. So it's really the integration of all of it. So I talked to somebody. There's a somebody asked me recently about. It was another coach actually who was asking me about. I can't remember what his question was, but it was kind of, where are you at, or one of those sort of open-ended questions. And I said, I've written a lot about, and I've thought a lot about my life as a mosaic. And
Mm,
in fact, there is a thing about in the book about living my life like a mosaic, which is, piecing it together, making all these beautiful parts, and how when the candles lower, it glows differently than when the candles new and full,
mm,
and all of that, all those metaphors. And but I said to him, I'm getting this sense that although I really identify with that, that it's time to break the mosaic, this beautiful mosaic that I've created, that I love, that glows in different ways and all the aspects of me, and that's been embraced by the grout, that of
mm,
life or whatever. Said, but I'm getting the sense that I would like to let it just all the pieces now to go out and then liquefy. I'm getting like this liquefy vibe. So I'm getting
mm,
really woo woo. But I feel like, you know what I mean? Like it feels very cemented in when it's pieced in together. And I love the idea and the metaphor of the glow, and I identify with that. But I am feeling more liquid now. I'm feeling more, all my worlds are integrating. They don't need the
mm,
grout anymore. And I want to flow in it. I want to flow in that. And I think that's probably gets imparted to my clients for sure.
mm.
Just by osmosis too, right? But that's where I'm at. Like if I were, sort of coaching myself, I don't know if that
Yeah,
kind
but
of,
I mean, I think, all authors that I've spoken to, they have learned something about themselves through the process of writing,
yeah,
articulating their thoughts, their emotions, experience down onto paper. And
yeah,
it's through that process it can be quite cathartic in some regards, depending.
yeah.
We are coming close to the top of our conversation. I was wondering, Lisa, was there any last words or thoughts or wisdom you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
Gosh, wisdom. You know what? I think just remain open. We all have the capacity
Mm,
to be open. You're not in danger. You're not in danger if you are connected to yourself. You're smart, right? You
mm,
you know, if you really think about it, you know where you're actually in danger and where you're not. And I think to just stop, create the space, find the places where there are spaces to they're magical. I mean, there are magical places everywhere, spaces everywhere for living. That's where the living is. That's where the living is. And when you start doing that, it's counterintuitive because you're like, your brain will go, no, 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 but I don't have time to do that. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll put it on my calendar. Don't put it on your calendar. Just allow yourself to be open to it and you will see it. Just even put the thought in, I will be open to see the places where there are spaces. And then tell me what you come up with.
yeah, it's a great read, folks. It's The Places Where There Are Spaces, Cultivating a Life of Creative Possibilities. Lisa, thank you very much for your generosity of time and sharing and actually reading a couple of passages or a couple of chapters, passages from the book. It was very interesting to hear your stories and reflections because it's got my brain kind of cooking now with
Nice.
all I have other questions, but as there may have to be a part two. So thank you
Yeah,
very much, Lisa, for your time today. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
it's been my pleasure, my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Three, two.